Welcome back, or in some cases for the new faces, welcome to my channel where I talk mostly everything, personal vlogs, hair videos, and other times true crime. And although today's video will be no different, the reasoning will be. And so usually I talk about particular cases, but today, in honor of the holiday coming up, Halloween, I wanted to switch things up a little bit. Now, I do not know what we will be naming this series, nor do I know the posting schedule, how we'll be posting, how often I will be posting these videos, and for how long. Obviously, most likely until Halloween is over, but of course in due time. Today, this video is not about intros, and I do not want to be rambling. This video, our first episode of this series, is going to be on John Benet and Ramsey. At first I was not going to go ahead and talk about this case because I said I wanted to make this series just basically like mysterious, unsolved, scary cases that I found very, very like suspenseful. And also because the case was so famous around Christmas time, I thought maybe I should keep this for Christmas, but whatever. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the famous case of John Benet Ramsey. And of course, this is a very, very famous case. So I'm sure a lot of you guys know about this case, especially, amongst the area. But surprisingly, like myself, there were a lot of people that knew about the case but didn't really know in depth about the case, or there were people that were basically keeping up with the case and didn't get the verdict or any updates on it. And so John Benet Ramsey was born on August 6th in the year of 1990, which made her a fire sign, a Leo to be exact. So I knew her personality was just over the top and out of this world. And she had been born in the bustling and thriving city of Atlanta, Georgia. She was born to her parents, Patricia Patty Ramsey, and in this video I will be referring to her mom as Patty, just so you guys know, and her father, John Benet Ramsey. So as you guys can see, she was a junior to her father. And John Benet had a beautiful home life, you guys. Well, from the outside looking in and from what we can see. She grew up with two of her siblings in the home. Patsy and John had two children together, which had been Burke, which was her older brother, and then John Benet. And from a previous marriage, John had three other children that he shared with his ex-wife. Those three children names were John Andrews, Melinda, and Beth. And in 1992, so just 4 years before John Benet had been born, her sister, Beth, had tragically passed away in a car accident. And so the pair got married, Patsy and John. They got married in the year of 1980. And in 1987, 7 years after getting married, they gave birth to their son, Burke. And while John Benet was described as a fireball and someone with a burst of energy, Burke was more described as reserved and shy and introvert. And like John Benet, her mother, Patsy, had actually been a beauty pageant winner, Miss Virginia. And she, of course, wanted John Benet to go ahead and follow in her footsteps, being just like her or at least better. And being a part of the beauty pageant contest and even winning Miss Virginia was not only the only thing that she had accomplished. Patsy had actually went on to graduate from college and get a degree in journalism. So John Benet, her father, he had actually served 11 years in the Navy, and afterwards he had went on to become a successful businessman. He graduated from the University of Michigan. He had actually went on to start his company in 1989, and this company had been called Advanced Product Group. And now this was just the first of his many projects that eventually merged and became one big company actually, that was called Access Graphics. In the year of 1996, his company had actually grossed over $1 billion. And Ramsey was also named Entrepreneur of the Year of that year. So pretty big stuff. He was making those money moves for his family. He truly made sure that they were well off financially, physically, and so forth and so on. Well, from the outside looking in. Jean Benet, as I stated before, was a beauty pageant contestant, and she was a multi-winner. She held so many titles in just a short period of time that she had been on this earth, which I'm sure Patsy was super proud of. Being a former beauty pageant winner and then having your daughter express that same interest and then going ahead and acing it, I am sure she was bragging all the time about it, and rightfully so. She had won America's Miss Royal, Colorado State All-Star Cover Girl, Little Miss Chevrolet, I believe it's pronounced, but I'm gonna go ahead and put the spelling on the bottom, Michigan, again Little Miss Colorado, Little Miss Merry Christmas, Little Miss Sunburst, and National Tiny Beauty. And so my girl was booked and busy, and as I stated before, Jean Benet, of course, was nothing short of amazing from what we were presented with. According to her mother, she was a ball of fire, and she was filled with many talents as well.
She could stand on her head. She could hula hoop. She was an entertainer from the word go.
She was a spark plug in our family. That's how I looked at her. She kept things alive and going.
Age and thriving, might I add, where she had actually won her first pageant contest at the age of only 4 years old. And Patsy really took the pageant life very seriously. And of course, it was her interest, so I'm sure that she wanted her daughter to, as I stated earlier, be like her or better, basically. She had even, and I will hold my opinions later, but she had even went as far as bleaching little Jean Benet's hair so she can appear more blonder. And for some reason, I just feel like that is so dangerous. All those chemicals on her hair, and we don't know how frequently she did it, but I can just imagine. And it's crazy because this is very common in the pageant world. From just what I heard and some of the shows that I watched, some of the people just speaking on their experiences, this is sadly very common amongst those young women, having to get their hair bleached and going through all these cosmetics, heavy makeup, always having to get their cuticles pushed back because of nails, and just destroying these children, basically. I've always side-eyed those pageants because it's like, why are you guys judging children? It's I don't know. But nevertheless, Jean Benet aced it every time, and she took home the trophies, and it made her mother very proud. Jean Benet was a very charismatic, energetic, and magnetic little girl, and she gravitated everyone to her, and she had a lot of friends, and of course she had friends over. And I was watching one of my videos doing my research, and it came up that she had one of her childhood friends at her home, and they were basically playing and whatnot in Jean Benet's room, and she asked about her trophies and her crowns, and Jean Benet let her know that I just won these from my pageants. And she kind of added that the trophies were more so for her mother rather than her. So it seemed as if even though Jean Benet was really good at what she did, she had only been doing it to please her mother. Of course, we don't know how true that is. We cannot, we're just speculating at this point and using whatever evidence that we have. And also, what was said from word of mouth from people who knew her and interacted with her. It had even been said that on her off days, when all the makeup and all the kitten heels was off, she liked to just play and just be messy and get dirty and ride her bike and scrape up her legs and elbows and just have fun. And you're probably thinking okay, where is Dad in all of this? Where is Mr. Ramsey in all of this? We're talking about Miss Patsy. Where's Mr. Ramsey? He did not necessarily approve of the whole pageant thing. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure he was proud of his daughter's accomplishments and proud of all her trophies and the things that she won, and you know, the fact that she was occupied with something that was good and, you know, whatnot. But he did not enjoy the idea of the pageant life, and rightfully so. But with him being so tied up in working his business, his successful business, it was really hard for him to maybe you know, kind of regulate home. And I am pretty sure, like most little girls, in a sense, she did want to be like her mother and be in the pageants. But we may never know why. We may never know what her interest was or what she might have done when she get older, because she's no longer here with us. From the outside looking in, the Ramseys had a beautiful home and a beautiful home life. They had the groundskeepers, the maids, the whole nine. And the house that they lived in was huge. I'm talking mansion, 4 stories, 7,000 square feet. Their house stood on 15th Street, surrounded by a bunch of other beautiful, beautiful homes. And John Benet's room was on the 2nd floor. And she even had a huge balcony in her room and also a marble decked out bathroom for herself. Their entire home was decked out, and it was considered what some would call a Tudor styled home. And if you guys are unfamiliar with what that is, because I was unfamiliar with what that is, it is just this huge house that has certain characteristics to it, and that's what makes it a Tudor styled home. Now, in the year of 1993, when John Benet was just 3 years old, Patsy had actually been diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer, and I am sure this took a huge toll on her liking. After treatment, she had actually went through remission, and all the while that this is going on, Patsy had actually went ahead and took the kids to a regular doctor checkup, and this is where she found out that the children had actually been showing signs of bathroom regression. Jean Benet had also been showing signs of eating regression. Now, Patsy, of course, was not happy about this. Rightfully so. We have this woman here who, you know, she has her kids always done up, living in this beautiful home, and she has her child going ahead peeing. Of course, this is what kids do, but Patsy did not look at it like that. And so she was very, very pissed that John Benet had been wetting the bed. It had been said that John Benet had been actually getting disciplined in the bathroom by Patsy, and we are, of course, unsure in what way or what you have been doing to her, but she, of course, was not happy about the bedwetting. And as I stated before, Jean Benet was not the only one of the children that had been doing this. Her brother Burke had actually been doing the same thing, and he had actually been smearing his fecal matter. It had actually been reported that they found a grapefruit-sized, you know, turd in John Benet's bed, but they are unsure if it came from Jean Benet or if it came from her brother Burke. December 31st, 1993, it was stated that she had still been drinking from the bottle, so the doctors looked at that as eating regression. And then we get to 1994, so at this time she's about 3 or 4 years old, and they say that she had a bladder infection along with vaginal discharge. They diagnosed her with vaginitis, and they gave her amoxicillin to go ahead and clear it up. And now, you know, brothers and sisters play, brothers and sisters fight, they play fight. So siblings fight, they play fight, whatever, things happen. But it was stated that Burke had actually hit her with a golf course, and this actually happened in, I believe, the ending of 1994. But it was said that the Ramseys, and I'm sure Patsy, had been looking into getting plastic surgery so they can go ahead and cover up the scar. Mind you, this happened in 1994, so she had to be around 4 years old. Now, I wouldn't say that this is key evidence. I mean, depending on where you stand in this case and how you are looking at this case. But of course, we know the father was very well off, and he had actually, a few days leading up to Christmas, or around Christmas time, around time that this happened, received a huge bonus from his job, and at that time he had also been named Businessman of the Year. So now that we do have a little more background on John Benet and just her family life, we are going to go ahead and move on to the days leading up to her death.
4. What'd you get, Benet? Oh.
All right, so 3 days before Christmas, John Benet had actually performed at a mall. So on approximately December 22nd, 1996. And there's actually footage of this, and it's just a little cute video. And she's playing her little instrument, and she's putting on this awesome performance for the onlookers. And the crowd was cheering her on, and she just looks so cute in her little outfit. And it's just honestly so sad because outside of all the theories and the rumors surrounding this case and whatnot, for some odd reason, no one really stops to think in these videos like, wow, this is literally a little girl and she was so talented, and we obviously don't know what stress or pressure she was under, especially, you know, being a pageant girl and whatnot. And it's just like, she was so talented, and even in her last days, not even knowing, she was still putting a smile on people's faces. And it's honestly just sad to sit and research and look back at these videos and know what happened to that young girl just days later. And then when I was doing my research, I did come across a video, and he made such a very valid point that when John Benet did not have her makeup on in that attire for her beauty pageants, she looked like a normal kid. She looked free and just like a regular 6-year-old. So I felt like that was very, very important to know. And I tried to find as much pictures as I can of her in that state, rather than her looking so like grown and exaggerated. But moving on, like 2 days before Christmas, John Benet and Burke, of course, the entire Ramsey family, had been visited by a man who usually would come and dress as Santa Claus every year, and he would basically just go from house to house, you know, and he would play as the neighborhood Santa. And then the night before Christmas, it was assumed that the Ramsey family had a normal night. The maids and the rest of their team had the holidays off, of course, and for the holidays, for Christmas, Patsy made sure to decorate the house so lovely and wonderful. Every single room had a Christmas tree of their own. And that was literally just how the family was. Like, they always had the extravagant parties and cute, you know, holiday decoration. The kids were well put together. The house was always done and nice, not a speck of hair or dust out of place. And it had been said that the kids were well behaved. And so Christmas morning rolls around, and it said that they woke up really early in the morning. The kids went downstairs to go ahead and open their gifts, of course. And there are a lot of videos on the internet that they have of the previous Christmases that the Ramseys had, and just them opening their gifts, all smiles. It was one year that she had got this really cute pink lamb car or something, and then the other one she got stairs to go ahead and open his gifts, he said. So like, he wanted to go ahead and get a head start. And from the reports, it was stated that between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. John Benet had to go ahead and get some pineapples and milk, and this was just a little snack that they love to have, especially Burke. And so honestly, it's unclear whether she snuck downstairs with Burke to go ahead and get it, but like, you know, during the night when they came back, or if she ate it at the party, because it was said that it was a fruit bowl there. And so Dad said the family slept through the night. He took a melatonin to help him go ahead and sleep with ease, and everyone pretty much just slept through the night. And so they had gotten that night with the intentions that they were going to get up the next morning and go ahead and take a family vacation to the other home that they owned in Michigan. And so they were fancy. As I stated before, they were very well off. They had 2 jets, and John was also a pilot as well. I forgot to mention that earlier. And so he was going to go ahead and fly the plane, their jet, actually, the private jet, to their home in Michigan. And it had been noted in multiple videos that Patsy adored this home that they had out there. And so the plan was for them to go ahead and leave early in the morning after the kids got up, and go ahead and enjoy their vacation out there. Patsy wakes up around 5 in the morning, and she says that she grabs her black velvet pants and red sweater that she had wore the previous night to their friend's Christmas party. She said the night before she laid it across the tub, and so that morning she just went ahead, grabbed it, and threw it on. So it was said that they had 2 staircases in the house, and she had a favorite one, I believe, and she went ahead and took the spiral staircase downstairs so she can go ahead and make herself some coffee before getting everyone out. As you guys remember, I stated earlier, they were going to go ahead and head on a family trip to Michigan, and so she just wanted to gather herself and gather her thoughts before, getting everyone up and the house become hectic. And so as she's walking down the steps, she sees 3 pages just laid out across the steps. And so in Patsy's mind, she's like, oh, okay, she, meaning the housekeeper, sent the money back that she had borrowed, because earlier that year she had actually asked John to borrow some cash, and so Patsy thought that the maid had just been returning it, but that was not the case at all. This was not a note from the housekeeper. This was indeed the infamous ransom note. So Patsy picks up this note, and the note is addressed to John Ramsey, which is the father. And I'm just going to go ahead and read it. So it states, Dear Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are, and I just want you guys to keep that "we" in mind. So let's continue. We are a group of individuals that represents a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but we do not respect the country it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, but if you would like for her to see 1997, you must follow this letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. They wanted $100,000 in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 they wanted in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate attache to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 in the morning tomorrow. We'll instruct you on your delivery. And then they go on to state that the delivery will be exhausting, so make sure you are well rested. They continue on saying, if we monitor you getting the money early, then we will arrange for an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier pickup of John Benet. Any deviation of not our instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. They go on to say that you would also be denied her remains for proper burial. The 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter is not particularly fond of you, so I advise you not to provoke them. And speaking to anyone about your situation, as far as the police, the FBI, will result in her being beheaded. If we catch you talking to stray dogs, she dies. It goes on to say, if you alert Blink authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way tampered with or marked, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any is found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned, we are familiar with law enforcement's tactics and also their countermeasures. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try and outsmart us. Follow our instructions, and so it's a group again. And you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny, as well as the authorities. Don't try and grow a brain drawn. You are not the only fat cat around. Do not think that killing will be difficult. Do not underestimate us, John. Use that good southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory. Signed, SBTC. And so that had been the ransom note, and it had been 3 pages long, and it had some spelling errors, some scribbles, and no, we're not going to get into that just yet. And so once Patsy realized what this is, she goes ahead and she goes into John Benet's room, and she realizes that John Benet is not there. So she's like, wait a minute, this is serious. So she starts screaming, she's frantic, and she's calling for her husband, and her husband comes down, and he's like, Patsy, what the heck is going on? And she's like, she's gone. John Benet is gone. She's missing. Look at this note. And they go downstairs, and they end up calling the police, And this call had been made at approximately 5:52 in the morning.
Police. What's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left and our daughter's gone. A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter? 6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old. How long ago was this? I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's gone. Does it say who took her? What? Does it say who took her? I don't know. There's a ransom note here. It's a ransom note? It says SBTC. Victory. Please. Okay, what's your name? Are you Kathy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please. I'm sending an officer over, okay? Please. Do you know how long she's been gone? No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please. Okay, well, there's somebody. I am, honey. Please. Take a deep breath, please. Okay? Hurry. Patsy.
And so this call was made roughly about 50-something minutes after Patsy had initially woke up. This 911 call has also been dissected by so many people, so many times. They played it back and played it again and paused it and slowed it down and, upped the volume at some points. And there was this last 6 seconds of this call where there is 2 faint voices that can be heard, and it was said to have been either one of the parents, maybe Patsy, and them talking to Burke as well. And so at first I was not able to hear at all what people were talking about in the background. And then after watching multiple videos, I then was able to finally catch a little something. And it does sound like someone in the background is saying what did you do or what did, and that's all I can make out. And it could have been anything. It could have been anyone speaking at that point in time. We do know that, Patsy called family over, friends over, so we do not know exactly who it was. But the 911 operator is like, Patsy, and then you hear it. So I'm going to go ahead and just insert that clip for you guys so you guys can go ahead and make your own opinion.
Patsy?
And so you can definitely hear what did you do. But people feel as if you can also hear a female's voice saying, help me, Jesus, and then followed by a male's voice saying, we're not talking to you. And then a child's voice followed afterwards saying, what did you find? And that is legit just according to the people that were dissecting this 911 call. Around 6 a.m., that is when the police and first responders started to arrive onto the scene. And initially, the first officer that had been on the scene had been Officer French. And before I get into all of that, if you are wondering where Burke is at this point in time, he is still sleeping soundly in his bed. And it's been reported, I'm so sorry, that he was actually awakened by the officers' flashlights when they were doing a courtesy check. And that is when one of the officers proceeded to wake Burke up by accident. And so a lot of people that have been covering this case or know about this case feel as if Burke had not been sleeping at all, and they feel like he had been faking it. But we're going to get into that soon. And so the officer arrives on the scene, and it was said that Patsy was actually really disturbed by what the police officer had been wearing. I guess he was wearing his work uniform, and it's unclear if she had been scared of the police activity or if she had been nervous that now the kidnappers would know that the police was there because they showed up in their uniform. So that part is completely unclear. She could have also been worried about the whole gossiping thing and everybody in the, on their block seeing all this police activity and wondering what's going on. But it's like in this moment, moment, who really cares about that? You know, as a parent, it's like we don't care as long as help is here and it came fast. We don't care. But I really don't know if that was it. So I do feel like with the whole ransom note and the police showing up in their police attire, she may be one of them to come incognito or something, whatever. But she was upset and we are unclear why. And so after the police had been called, for some reason, I believe maybe for comfort or, you know, just to have familiar faces around her in this time, Patsy went ahead and called some of her friends over. And if you guys can remember, they did attend a Christmas dinner party with one of their family friends at their residence the night before. And so they came over, the Whites, they came over and they had collected Burke just to, you know, get him out of the mayhem. And it was said that, you know, Burke woke up and he was confused and he was crying, of course, and that's when Mr. White went ahead and took him over to their residence. It was said that the home was swarmed with people at this moment, and Patsy and John, according to multiple reports, was said to have been weirdly distant with each other. And I'm sure, as you guys can see, in most of these cases, when a kid is missing or something happens to a child, the parents are usually inconsolable. And people grieve differently, they handle situations differently, but most times, 10 times, 9 times out of 10, the families are usually together, comforting each other. And a lot of people say that it was just very weird how they were acting towards each other. I mean, they were on completely different sides of the home. Patsy was in one side of the home being comforted by her friends, completely inconsolable. And John was on the other side, and it was said he was opening mail, you know, taking phone calls, just ducked off into his office. And as I stated before, people handle things completely differently. Some people grieve and they cry, and others dive themselves into work. And I can't tell anyone how to handle a situation like that because I have not been in that situation. And so the police comes in and they do their little initial search. And it was said that they checked all the areas and they even checked the cellular area. And the door had either been locked or jammed from some accounts. Overall, they weren't able to get in. But since it was considered an abduction, since they felt as if Jean Benet had not been in the home, they did not thoroughly search the house. And so initially they were just trying to look for a way that the quote-unquote kidnappers were able to get in and get Jean Benet without, leaving any evidence behind, because it was not much to show that this was an abduction at all. There weren't even any forced entry. And so Detective Linda arrives on the scene, and she actually arrives at 8 a.m. And just to go back to the note, I know we said we was going to talk about it in depth later, but just to go back to the notes, remember it said that they would follow up between 8 and 10 a.m. And so 8 came, and 9 came, and 10 o'clock came, and there was no follow-up from these so-called ransom holders, these kidnappers. And it was said at this time, John was over there, joking it up with the officers, and Patsy was chatting it up with her friends. And it was noted that not one person noticed the time going by, and not one person noticed the absence call of the kidnappers and brought it to anyone's attention. So to people, that was really, really odd. And at this time, of course, the police went ahead and tapped just in case for this moment, and that moment never came. The random STBC whatever people never called. It had been said that no one had any type of urgency, and so the father went ahead and he gathered the ransom money, but nothing came of it. And some truly feel as if the Ramseys had been moving and carrying on as if they knew that the ransom people would not be calling them back, as if they knew that Jean Benet was already gone. And so since this was now considered a kidnapping, the FBI had been involved. And like I told you guys before, Linda shows up, and when she gets there, she wants to do a thorough search of the house. She wants to do an in-depth search. She does not want no stone left unturned. And so they decide to have the search, and Dad and his friend helps, and this is where everything turns sour. More sour than it already has been. And so if you guys can remember, and if you guys have been keeping up, they didn't really do a very thorough search before Linda came, because they were under the impression that Benet had not been in the house. They was under the impression that she had been abducted. And so when she had first arrived on the scene, not too long afterwards, one of the detectives that had been working on the case, Ron Walker, he actually received the ransom note, and he was going ahead and doing his little analyzation, and he ended up coming to the conclusion that this ransom note might not be real. And so after he gets this epiphany, he goes and he calls Linda, and he's like, keep an eye on them. I just need you to keep an eye on the family. I don't want you to be overbearing or, be too suspicious, but just keep an eye on the family. And so Linda's like, cool. And so she's keeping an eye on the family and whatnot. And John actually went ahead and left it's unclear where he went, but he left for over 60 minutes, I think about 90 minutes, she said. And so Linda goes ahead and she calls Mr. Walker. If you guys remember, he told her to keep an eye. So she's, going ahead and dropping the tea basically and letting him know like, hey, he left for 90 minutes. I don't know what he was doing, but yeah. Mr. Walker did not want that. He already knew that Patsy was in close range in eyesight where they can see, but John was the one who was lingering, and so he wanted for John to stay close to Linda. And so he told Linda, how about you guys go ahead and search the house? You bring John and you ask him to help you do a very thorough search throughout the house. Don't make it too obvious, just to kind of keep him in her vicinity. And even before all of this, the DA's office told the officers to go there with respect and do not look at them in a bad light. Do not approach them as suspects. Basically, they did not want the family under scrutiny, and I don't really think it had anything to do with the Ramsey's lifestyle. I think it had more so to do with them being looked at as a grieving family that just had their daughter abducted, and they just wanted to do their jobs properly and not be biased. And so quickly after that, John volunteers for him and his friend Mr. White to go ahead and do the search themselves. And before I continue, let me just go ahead and say this: with every video that I post, I do like to keep it unbiased and just for people to receive the information fairly, and so they form their own opinions. But the way this case was handled honestly really pissed me off. But let's continue. So I don't know if Fleet and John looked any other places, but from multiple accounts, it's been said that they went directly to the basement, and John opened the door to the wine cellar, and it was dark in there, and that's where he found her body. From Fleet's accounts, he said that within moments, they found her body, and she was wrapped in a white blanket. And so John screams at the top of his lungs, and he runs into the cellar, and he goes to go pick up his daughter. He runs back upstairs, and he places her on the floor. He quickly goes to take the tape off of her mouth and untie her wrists. At this point, you guys, Benet had been long gone. And when she had been found with something covering around her neck and tying up her arms. Her mouth had tape over it. And just a disclaimer before we continue, I will be reading and going over the autopsy of what happened to this young lady. And if understandably this is something that you do not want to hear, injury to a child, this is the time now to go ahead and click off. Benet death time was set to be on December 26th at 13:23. John E. Myers was the one who conducted this autopsy, and the results had actually came back under 48 hours. And his findings had been that when he first arrived, the descendant had been laying on her back. She was initially covered by the blanket, as we stated earlier, and also a Colorado Avalanche sweatshirt. Her arms had been over her head, and her head was turned towards the right. A litigation mark had been found on her neck and another on her wrist. There had also been a small abrasion by her ear and her cheek. And when they found her, she had been wearing her hair in 2 pigtails. On her finger, she had this little gold ring, and in her left palm, she also had a heart drawn, and this heart had actually been drawn in red ink. She had on a white long-sleeved collarless shirt, And on this shirt, it had like a sequence star on it, and that star was silver. And she also had these white underwears on. It was spelled Wednesday on it. It had been stained with urine and some blood. Around her crotch area also had red stains. She had a hemorrhage to the eye, massive skull fracture with bleeding and bruising to the brain, and her bladder had also been completely empty. Jean Benet's cause of death had been strangulation with a severe blow to her head. So they're guessing that the initial blow had made her unconscious and then she was strangled. DNA had been found in her underwear, and there had also been signs that that night she was sexually assaulted, and there were signs of long-term abuse. And so when she had been found, she had undigested pineapples still in her stomach, and the ME reported that it had to be consumed between 1 to 2 hours beforehand. And I mean, it hadn't even been digested, at that time. And now, if you guys can remember, the next morning in the house, what was found on the counter? On the counter, there was a bowl of the pineapples and there was a cup of the iced tea. And so, the question remains, who ate it beforehand? Because remember, Burke did say he snuck downstairs. Who ate it beforehand? We don't know. Did they have the bowl before they went to sleep? Did Jean Benet really fall asleep in the car and then get carried upstairs, or did she have a snack before bed? And some people strongly feel like, why are the accounts so scattered? Why don't you guys honestly remember? Because if this is the last time that you are seeing your child, you would try to remember every detail. Now they are saying between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m. that is when she had been sexually assaulted, and then around 12 a.m. is when she was strangled and she passed. To clarify that up, actually 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. she suffered the blow to the head, and then 12 a.m. is when she was essayed while she was unconscious, most likely, and then she succumbed. And it was said that everyone slept soundly through the night. No one heard a peep. There was no signs of forced entry. And so that leads us to ask, what truly happened that night? From the beginning, as I stated before, this case truly pissed me off. And practically it was doomed from the beginning. From Patsy calling her friends over to comfort her and then basically contaminating what they didn't know at the time was a crime scene. Side eyes. To them and the police walking up and down the home, Dad picking her up and transferring her somewhere else and basically touching her, just everything in general. And so her body had been found in a room. The Ramseys had been said to use it for a utility room. And so in my mind, this room is inactive, right? Not used. And the overall area where she was found was said to have been the wine cellar. And, this area would be dark. We're going by logic because wine should not really be exposed to the heat. And even Fleet recalls this area being very dark. Well, from his account, states not well lit. And this is John's friend. And so in that same basement, and I mean, in this home, the Ramsey's home, it was 15 rooms. And so there were plenty of rooms that they had to search and overall just cover. But in that basement, in one of the rooms, there had been an area where there was a window, and this window had been broken. And initially they are like, yeah, this is it. This is exactly how they got in to get her. And so they are thinking that this is a lead. And John basically kind of shuts that down. And he's like, oh, no, I kind of lost my keys one night and had to break in. But there had been a suitcase under it, a blue suitcase. And so the Ramseys are like, yeah, no, that we cannot explain. And so it's December, right? It's snowing. It's Colorado. It's snowing a lot. And there were no snow prints or whatever. But I feel like I could have left that detail out, so we're not even gonna get into that. But several of the doors and windows were unlocked and easily accessible. And the Ramseys had several. And I believe it was over 100 or something, but don't quote me on that. Overall, you guys, this was just a huge, huge house. And even with the setup, the way Jean Benet, where her room was and where her parents' room was, this was a huge, huge ass house. And I just honestly really wish that they would have got into that room sooner. Like, who knows what would have happened. Like, the crime scene maybe wouldn't have been contaminated. They would have got even more evidence, and we probably would have known today what really happened. But sadly, that was not the case. The Ramseys did not speak to the police for 6 months after their obviously initial generic questioning. But for like a more thorough sit down, no. They made the police wait an entire 6 months. And then before questioning, they had conditions. They did want to listen to their tape that they, of the things that they said initially, just so they don't say the wrong thing or whatever, which is pretty odd. And so the way the Ramseys were like moving, the scrutiny that they faced was crazy. And like everybody had their suspicions and whatnot. And I mean,
Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, did either of you have anything to do with the death of your daughter?
No.
No.
Mr. Ramsey, did you kill John Benet?
No, I did not.
Mrs. Ramsey, did you kill your daughter?
No, I did not kill my daughter.
And I see John Ramsey carrying Jean Benet up the last 3 steps from the basement. And my mind exploded.
Benet Ramsey is back in the news again with lots of DNA developments going on, and that's why we decided to go back to our original analysis of Patsy Ramsey and just zoom in for you on her behavior. I think it's a great opportunity to read Patsy's body language.
One of the questions is, what reason would a kidnapper have for leaving behind both the ransom letter and the body?
I hope to ask the killer that someday, face to face. We believe that this was a kidnapping originally that went bad. Now this person, this creature, its mind doesn't work like ours. It's boiling. So whatever was going through this creature's mind, we can't logically analyze and explain.
John had claimed that the FBI was not called at all when in fact they had been called, if you guys remember, and they were actually fast to get on the scene, but Boulder had said no, and it was considered a homicide, and so it was turned over to the Boulder police, and the Boulder police tried to investigate it for about like 24 hours, and after that they called back the FBI for reinforcements. And now understandable, because this area was not well known for crime, and around that time there had not been much, activity in that area, and so they probably didn't really know how to handle the situation properly, as we can see. But even down to Linda, from when she arrived on the scene, knew that something was odd and something was up, and even Ron Walker knew that something was odd and something was up since from the ransom note. And so everyone truly felt like something had gone down that night, and sadly that Jean Benet had became a victim of one of them, allegedly. And so the way they had been moving after was completely weird, as I stated before. It was said that shortly after Jean Benet had been found, John was on the phone, her father, calling for a plane to go ahead and head to Atlanta. He was trying to get out of Colorado, and his reasoning for this was because he said he wanted to be in Atlanta, in their hometown where Jean Benet had been born. And to be fair, he probably did not want to be in the same home that his daughter had just been found dead in and possibly was murdered in. And but it's like so soon, but we cannot walk in his shoes. We are not in that situation. So after that, no one was interviewed, not the family members, not family friends, no one was interviewed. And that was another reason why a lot of people felt like the Boulder Police Department handled this so poorly. Burke, he was questioned shortly, but like what the family had went through was not like an interrogation, if you know what I mean. And so it didn't really count. And besides, Burke was like 9 at the time. He was a kid. But Patsy and John had not been interviewed till May 1997. And like I had mentioned earlier, by this time they were lawyered up and they had conditions. And I also wanted to bring up something that I thought was really, really odd, at the fact that the police telecom communicator that Patsy had been speaking to. She was served with a gag order to not speak on that 911 call, and I really wonder why. And I was thinking maybe, okay, it was a public case, and at the time they probably didn't want, people commenting on it and having drama surrounding it. But then I'm like, why didn't she get called to testify? Things of that nature. And so it's like, I don't know. And so now let's talk this damn note. Majority people think this note is fake. A lot of people spent so much time trying to decode this. And I mean, this note was a huge, major part of this case. It was said that many of the words and lining from this letter literally came from movies like Dirty Harry and one movie I never even heard of called Speed. And so me reading this letter and not really knowing, the specifics behind the case, I would have thought, because not seeing the movie, that wouldn't have stood out to me at all. And so there were literally specialists decoding this letter, and the notepad, the writing pad that was used, it literally came from the house. It came out of Patsy's writing drawer. And not only that, the kidnappers made not one but two rough drafts. And so his brain was working, and he did not come with his own pen. He used their pen, which, I mean, okay, those things could have been laid out, but you didn't bring a ransom note. This sounds like a very sloppy kidnapper, a very sloppy, not well thought out job, very, very impulsive, giving very much they don't know what they're doing. So that's why people feel like this was not a kidnapping at all. After numerous specialists sat down and attempted to decode this ransom note, there had been a group of forensics and also a team of former police officers that had actually sat down and they tried to do a test. And after doing their own little test of writing the letter and even making the mistakes, doing the two drafts, blah, 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 it took them, and they analyzed that it would have took the kidnapper 21 and a half minutes to write this letter. 21 and a half minutes. Let's just think about that for a second. 21 and a half minutes in a house that you are, one, unfamiliar with, two, you might have just created, made a crime, or more likely about to commit a crime because John Benet is gone, or likely about to be gone. And how? You understand? That is the part that kind of trips people out. And then people are like, okay, this is a millionaire. John was a well-known millionaire, successful businessman, whatever. Why was the kidnappers asking for that specific amount? And if you can remember earlier, I did tell you about a bonus that John received, and the bonus had been similar to the amount that the kidnappers had been asking for, but this information was not public, and the only people that knew about it was the people from his company, of course, and his family, and John, of course. And it's that's just an oddly specific number to ask for. So that's just things that people were pointing out about this note. People had also been saying that this letter was written to make whoever was the reader feel as if the writer was not from America, basically. America was English was their second language, And so in the year of 2000, Sina Wong, a handwriting analysis, she had actually spent 3 weeks trying to just go over and decode this note, and her findings were this. It says writing ability of this person is high, which means that whoever had written this letter, their first language was likely English, and they were fluent. It says that the gender of this writer had to be female and elderly age, or adult, so around 30. And mind you, it took Wong 3 weeks to analyze this versus the 21 and a half minutes it took for whoever wrote it to write this letter. And so, not trying to be biased, I am leaning more towards what the analyst said, and someone who actually sat there and took their time to decode this letter. 3 weeks at that, I'm listening to the expert. Her theory had been that Patsy wrote the notes, and she actually went ahead and compared this to multiple pieces of writing that Ramsey had done. And you guys get this, it was over 200 similarities. Not saying that she wrote it, but it's a little weird. And so they went ahead and they tested John, and he came back not a match, negative. And they went ahead and they tested Patsy, and she came back inconclusive. And so make what you want with that information. All right, you guys, let's talk suspects. And I mean them narrowing on people other than the Ramseys. And I do want to kind of circle back and talk about Burke and his interviews as well, but just a little bit closer to the end. And so the DNA that had been found on Ramsey had belonged to a single unidentified man. And to save the dramatics and the extras, they compared the DNA to a database that they had with over 1.5 million samples, and none of them matched. And of course, the person could have not been convicted or whatever, but that just leaves us with more questions and leads us to a dead end. And now moving on to, I guess I'll say our third suspect, or I'll just say our first suspect other than the Ramseys, just to make it, not complicated. And so first up on the list, we have Mr. Bill McReynolds. And just before I continue, in no way are we accusing these people. We are just basically speaking on the theories that are out there with the public information that we do have. And now Mr. Bill had been just a man that, frequent locally in the area, and he would play Santa. He would go from house to house putting smiles on all the children's faces. And 2 days before Christmas, he had actually showed up to the Ramseys' home to go ahead and, I guess, visit John and Burke. It was also reported, sadly, that 20 years prior to the situation, his daughter had actually been kidnapped as well. And something very, very eerie about this Mr. Bill as well. Not really him, but his wife had actually wrote a play. And I'm not sure in what year she wrote this play, but she had actually wrote a play about a young girl being molested and found dead in a basement. So very, very eerie, if you ask me. Very, very close to this case. So I don't really know. There had been a quote from the Denver Post and from Bill, and it sort of gets weird. And I guess depending on how you look at it and, the circumstances, whatever, we're going to read what he said. So he states that her death basically moved him and that he took it very rough. This made people feel a sort of way, I guess. But he's like, no, don't take it that way. It's not what you guys think. It's harmless, essentially. He goes on to state that it made a profound change in him. And he even went on to say that the glitter that she had gifted him, he took that with him to go ahead and get his heart surgery. I'm guessing symbolic for like a good luck charm or something. And so he says that he felt so close to Jean Benet because no child has ever gifted him anything while he played Santa. And so to Bill, that made Jean Benet stand out. And this is where people feel like, well, I felt like it had already been getting weird, but this is where people kind of side-eye the situation. And so he went as far as letting Denver Post know that he even asked his wife that when he passes away, can she mix the glitter that Jean Benet gave to him with his ashes. Yeah. And so with all of this, people were looking at him a little crazy. But beyond all the weird and shady things that he was doing, they had no solid evidence against him, and Bill was not seen as a suspect. So they hit yet another dead end. And so that leads us to suspect number 4, I guess we can say, or in this case, suspect number 2, because this is other than the Ramsey's family. And so next on the list, we have Gary Olivia. Now, he had been considered suspect number 2, and he lived a few blocks from Jean Benet and was also a convicted offender. And one of the charges he had been picked up on was child pornography. And he had got locked up once again for something completely unrelated. And when they searched him, he actually had a picture of Jean Benet in his wallet. And so, of course, this is an active, famous case, and they pressed him about it. But Olivia had, an excuse or reasoning as to why he had this little random girl's picture in his wallet. And much like what Mr. Bill said, he states that her murder touched him deeply. He stated that he felt the need to build a monument or a shrine to remember her. But if you thought that was crazy, it gets even crazier. And I did not think it was possible with this case that anything can get more crazier than the facts that we have. But it does. And so his friend has this like sit down or whatever with In Touch magazine, and it speaks on Mary actually calling him a day after the murder, telling him that he hurt a little girl. And it's like, okay, yeah, he could have been talking about anyone, but he specified that this occurred in Colorado, and not just Colorado, Boulder, Colorado. And to the police's knowledge, JonBenet was the only young girl that was murdered that night in Boulder, Colorado. And what's even wickeder is that this man tried to strangle his mother the same way that JonBenet had been strangled and actually passed. But the attempt with his mother was obviously unsuccessful. And so still with all of this crazy information, his DNA was not a match to the DNA found on JonBenet. And so now we are at our last external suspect. Next up to the screen, we have John Carr. And so just a little backstory on him. Mr. Carr is a divorcee, and he is also a teacher, professor. And so he actually became a suspect after confessing to the murder of JonBenet Ramsey on his own wits to one of his associates, Michael Tracy. And Mr. Tracy was also a professor, but he was also a journalist as well. And so at this time, he was acting as if he was friends with Mr. Carr, and they was building a friendship and texting back and forth, chatting for a while, as a matter of fact 4 years. And Mr. Carr had a little confession to make to his new friend. And so before we get into that, I do want to go ahead and read off a statement from Mr. Tracy. He writes, "You are reading and hearing a truly dark side of the human psyche, and having to pretend that it's cool that I was going to sit and judge, because otherwise communication would cease. This was by far the worst experience." In Carr's emails back and forth with Mr. Tracy, he even used similar turns to the note. And what's even weirder is that he even referred to Patsy's mother's nickname, Natty. How would he know that? He states that he was in love with JonBenet, and he ended up hitting her on the head. And first and foremost, I don't know how you can love just a random child. And secondly, how can you hurt a child you claim to love? Doesn't make sense. But this is what he said, so. From his accounts, he states that JonBenet had been sound asleep when he got her. He states that he transferred her from her room to the basement, and when she came to, she was very confused, and she had been asking, "Where am I?" To which he replied, "Your basement." Which has me thinking, like, how did he know where the basement was in that big ass house? Like, how did he know the setup of the home? Because we know how the Ramsey house looked. We know how it looks inside. It's so much staircases, so much bedrooms, 15 rooms in all. I believe like 2 staircases. It's a huge house. So how did he know? He also goes on to state that he didn't want to disgrace her by having her in the room that he did have her in, which happened to be the utility room. And mind you, of course, this was a very public case, a very famous case, well known. And so most of this information was public. But he continues to say that he was supposed to only have her in the utility room for a little bit, and that's where she ended up, and that's where her father found her. But there are so many weird cases of criminals, prior criminals, or like wannabe well-known criminals. They feed off of the public knowing, oh, they committed this crime, even if it's not true. If a crime is, yes, it may sound crazy, but it's true, and it happens more oftentimes than we may think. I literally read about this like twice happening, but literally there will be random people trying to take facts that there's, that the police and the public already knows, and they would try to twist it and make their own story as if they committed the crime when they really didn't, just for notoriety. August 16, 2008, which is so weird because that's my birthday, but on that day, the authorities actually tried to track him down, and he was all the way in Thailand trying to escape child pornography charges that he had caught in California. And at this time, of course, it's looking like, okay, Mr. Carr may be the suspect allegedly, so we need to go ahead and apologize to the Ramsey's family because of how we treated him during this investigation. And so the district attorney, Mary L., she went ahead and she put out a statement to the Ramsey family. And so in this statement, she apologizes to the Ramsey family, and she just says that she is so sorry for, just zeroing on them. But Carr's DNA was not a match, despite all of that. And I'm sure you guys knew exactly where we was going with that. But they still looked into him because he said that he did not act alone. And if you guys remember, it was supposed to be 2 sets of footprints that they saw. And so, yeah, Mark Beckner, who happened to be Boulder's former chief, I believe. Yeah, so he stated that this confession was pure BS. He states that as soon as he heard it, he knew it was BS. So, not only did the evidence not match up at all, this man was not even in Colorado that night. He was in Georgia, and they have footage of that. They knew that it was not Mr. Carr within 18 hours. The DNA experts had went ahead and studied the DNA that they had found at the scene. And it was said that this DNA had transferred DNA. So I'm just going to go ahead and play the clip for you guys so they can explain it much better than I can.
DNA expert Dr. Henry Lee, best known from the O.J. Simpson case, studied the DNA from the JonBenet scene. Dr. Lee found that JonBenet's underwear may have held transfer DNA from the manufacture process, and proved this by testing an unopened bag of underwear, which also had foreign DNA on them. The CBS program concluded that the DNA from the crime scene was therefore fallacious.
And so that means the DNA could have been a match to any one of the people that we named earlier as a suspect, including the Ramseys. And this is why I say, since from the beginning, this was a very screwed investigation, and it's so sad because she didn't deserve to die in the way that she died, how young she died, and the fact that she had such a shitty investigation. She didn't deserve any of that at all. She deserved at least that. And so in 2013, it had actually came out that all the way back in 1999, so 3 years after this had happened, a grand jury was going to go ahead and indict the Ramseys, and they would have been indicted on charges of child abuse that resulted in death. But Alex Hunter, the Boulder Department police chief, said no, there was not enough evidence. And so, of course, that was dropped. And so, of course, we know all the theories about Burke possibly allegedly hitting JonBenet and the family covering up, or Patsy or Jean, one of them disciplining her the wrong way, it went wrong, and them trying to cover it up. I'm sure all of us has heard all of those theories, and honestly, it's just really sad to know that we may never know what happened to her. All right, you guys, now come. Let's talk evidence, let's talk aftermaths, and let's talk updates on the JonBenet Ramsey case. And you guys know this is more towards the ending of the video. And so at this point, 28 years has passed since JonBenet Ramsey was sadly murdered inside her childhood home. And so John Ramsey goes ahead and he speaks out, and he pretty much was wondering, if there is new technology, why wasn't any of the DNA found at the crime scene tested with this new technology? And so he wanted her case to be revisited, rightfully so. It had been very shocking to him that the Boulder Police Department did not test a lot of the evidence that they had, and he feels that they were not taking it very serious because they were so busy just zeroing in on him and his family. There was evidence that had been collected all the way from back in January 1997 that was not tested. At least 7 critical evidence, all returned back, all untouched and untested. Amongst that had legit been one of the weapons that was used to kill JonBenet. And so honestly, I'm literally just confused as to why that wasn't tested. So if you guys have any kind of answers as to why that was not tested, please let me know down below, because I'm baffled. And so it had been 125, I believe, possible leads that was not acted upon. And you guys get this, it had been released that not too long after this situation happened, a young girl had also been attacked in her home, in her room, in her own bed. And she lived not too far from the Ramseys, and her and Jean Benet was actually close. And so this case was referred to as the Amy case. And so if you guys want to go ahead and look it up and see details, but nothing much was to come of that case for that young girl. And so new information had came out. Well, we don't know if it's new information because we don't know how long they were sitting on this information, but new information had came out that the blue suitcase that had been found in the basement, the fibers in that suitcase had matched the fibers found on Jean Benet. And so all these leads, all these things, these new technology that the evidence is not ran against, it's just ridiculous. Allegedly, the police knew 2 weeks into their investigation after the murder that the Ramseys was not a match to the DNA found on Jean Benet. New information also that I had not heard much people speak on was the fact that there were stun gun marks found on Jean Benet. And so it's been said that most of the times these stun guns are used for people to comply, people that are not complying. And so people feel like Jean Benet's family being the culprits are really dumb, because why would they need Jean Benet to comply? What would they need for her to comply with? Especially if this was an accidental death, like cover up gone wrong type of thing. Jean Benet's father wants for the police to go ahead and revisit her case thoroughly and just go ahead and give him some closure before he goes, because till this day he is still looked at as the man who murdered his daughter basically and got away with it. This was a long video, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut it here. Thank you so very much for watching. If you guys watched to the end, make sure to drop your opinions on this case, because I definitely want to hear. That's why I kept this video mostly unbiased. I tried my best to keep my opinion out of it. And if you do guys have any type of dialogue in the comment section, please make sure to keep it very, very respectful and positive. And we will connect in the next one. Bye-bye and stay safe.
My name is Benet Ramsey and I'm 5'5".
5.5. Okay, pick one. Do that. Okay. What is your favorite animal at the zoo?
The monkeys, because they laugh and stuff and hang around.